Catholicism is one of the world's largest and most influential religions. He is seen as the first movement to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ, until the emergence of the Protestant Reformation in the Middle Ages, which leads to other interpretations. But even today, it gathers billions of followers and is governed by some of the oldest and most powerful institutions in human history, the Vatican and the papacy. Like any other human entity, the Catholic Church, in its political representatives, they did not avoid getting involved in scandals over the years. With a history of more than 2,000 years, there are many disputes, controversies, conflicts, and controversies involving both the administrative headquarters or Vatican, like its representatives, especially the chats, who are the greatest leaders, those who supposedly would be chosen by God and would have the mission of supporting the bridge, the connection between earth and heaven. But how did the teachings of Jesus, a poor man, son of a carpenter who preached barefoot, turn into such a wealthy institution and full of contradictions? What are the biblical foundations that justify the political and religious leadership of the popes, who were the worst representatives in history, and how the organization has dealt with the controversies that arose in recent years? Stay with us to learn the answers to these and other questions. What does the church not want you to know after all? Let's start with a question that many ask themselves. Why is someone chosen to be God's representative on earth as the Pope? What are the biblical foundations for electing the single leader who controls religion worldwide, concentrating so much power on himself? The most used biblical passage to support this is in Matthew 16 verses 18 and 19. Jesus, he was talking with some of his disciples. When you decide to ask Simon, as it was called up to that point, what did he answer when asked who he was? That is, Jesus himself, the apostle who left his job as a fisherman to follow Christ, replied saying that he was the Messiah, Son sent by the living God. The passage we mentioned is Jesus' conclusion when he changes Simon's name and gives him his mission. He says so, that's why I video, you rock, and on this rock I will build my church, and the power of death shall never prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. What you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and what you loose on earth will be disconnected on the ground. This role appointed by Christ is extremely important, wouldn't you agree? That's why Peter is considered the first leader of the early church, the first pope, and has this power conferred by Jesus to be the connection between the divine and the human, between the earth. His role would be to bridge these two realms. Therefore, your position is also called pontiff, because it means the bridge builder. According to Catholic tradition, Peter is said to have traveled to Rome on his evangelizing journey, where he was martyred for following and spreading Christian ideals. He would have been killed and buried in Nero's circus, a place that was outside the Roman walls and where the St. Peter's Basilica would later be built, the greatest architectural symbol in the history of the Vatican's papacy and the Church.
Catholic kiss.
However, all this is part of the official version, told by Catholic tradition, but it's not a consensus among Christians and historians. Many claim that Peter, in fact, never traveled to Rome and that there are no biblical foundations enough to justify adopting a single centralized leader for democracy. Manage all the precepts, decisions, assets, in short, everything that is. Or would it be related to the church? This version of events argues that the first centuries of Christianity were marked by an ecclesiastical structure, decentralized, with local communities led by bishops. Thus, the rise of the papacy as a centralized institution would have begun to develop in the 4th century, largely thanks to the influence of Emperor Constantine. Constantine would have converted to Christianity after dreaming of a cross inscribed with the words, "Under this sign, you will generate offspring." The next day, he ordered all soldiers to paint the Christian symbol on their shields, and indeed, they won a very important battle. From then on, the emperor played a significant role in legitimizing and promoting the Christian religion within the Roman Empire. In 313 AD, he issued the Edict of Milan, granting religious freedom to Christians and ending religious persecution. Later, in 325 AD, invoked the Council of Nicaea, which established important Christian faith doctrines and marked a turning point in the history of Christianity. Constantine played a crucial role in unifying the church and the state. He built the first Christian basilica in Rome, where St. Peter is believed to have been buried, establishing the foundations for what would come to be known as Vatican City. Moreover, Constantine granted Pope Sylvester I a series of privileges and lands, solidifying the Pope's position as an authority figure within the government. From the empire, this relationship between the papacy and the Roman imperial power established a model of collaboration between the church and the state, which shaped the history of Europe for centuries. The papacy continued to grow in influence and authority, eventually becoming one of the most powerful institutions. From the Middle Ages, the Vatican became the spiritual and administrative center of the Catholic Church. The Pope, as its leader, held authority not only over spiritual matters, but also over political and social issues. All this power vested in the papacy made it become a club position, which contributed to its role being distorted from its principles and purposes. Throughout the centuries, let's look at some examples of the worst and most controversial popes the Church has ever had. Starting with Stephen VI, who was the supreme pontiff between 896 and 897. He was elected during a turbulent period in the history of Catholicism, marked by political intrigues and rivalries among noble families of Rome, the central point of their pontificate. It was the trial of his predecessor, Pope Formosus, Stephen VI, influenced by members of the Roman nobility who were hostile to Formosus, called a synod in January 897 to judge the former pope. But there was a minor issue. Formosus had already passed away in 7 months. Even so, his body was exhumado, placed on the throne in his official garments, and brought to trial, making up the episode known as the Cadaver Synod. Stephen Basket Help, as prosecutor, interrogated the corpse and accused it of a series of crimes, including perjury, violation of canon law, and usurpation of the papacy. Out with Balso and Plata, could not defend himself. The trial's outcome was a posthumous conviction. The decrees and organizations of the ancient pope were annulled, his fingers were cut off, and he was stripped of his papal vestments. Beautiful was excommunicated, and his body was thrown in the Tibet River. For this was a common practice with criminals of the time.
Hey, Sealy.
The action of Stephen VI caused repulsion in many circles, both inside and outside the church. It became clear that he was acting on political rather than religious inclinations. His papacy was short and ended tragically. After the synod, Stephen VI was deposed and imprisoned, and a few months later was killed in his cell. Let's move on to Pope John XII. Regarded as one of the most controversial in church history, he held office between 955 and 964 and ascended to the papacy at only 18 years old, becoming one of the youngest pontiffs of all time. He ducked. What could be considered a source of energy and renewal, in fact, was the fuel for a range of immature and reckless behaviors, which soon became a source of scandal. Known for his debauched lifestyle, and because of his highly questionable morals, John XII's bad reputation quickly spread. He was accused of hosting parties and orgies in the apostolic palace and appointing lovers as cardinals. Furthermore, there are reports that he committed incest and even ordered the assassination of his political opponents. John XII's scandalous behavior drew the indignation of many ecclesiastical and lay leaders, who saw his conduct as an affront to Christian principles and papal dignity. His critics even accused him of being the Antichrist due to his depraved conduct. Beyond moral issues, the papacy of John XIII was also marked by political and military conflicts. He sought alliances with various rulers, and in some instances, got involved in violent disputes. His political recklessness and inability to maintain stability in religion contributed to the weakening of papal authority. He died prematurely at 27, likely due to the consequences of his libertine lifestyle, leaving behind a legacy of scandal and criticism. His papacy was a clear example. Two challenges faced by the Church when unsuitable leaders take on a higher position. After his death, the Church sought to restore his reputation and reaffirm its moral authority. But the consequences of Pope John II's papacy, they continued to echo through many years. This also happened after the pontificate of Boniface VIII, who led the institution from 1294 to 1303. He is considered by many the atheist pope. And there was also a government marked by controversies that deeply shook the papal authority, especially because of the political conflict, which created serious tensions throughout Europe. One of the most notable controversies of this pope was the conflict about power with King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair. This conflict arose largely from Boniface VIII's attempts to assert the Pope's supremacy about the kings. The principles are here. In temporal matters such as tax collection and control over the appointment of ecclesiastical positions. Philip IV, who sought to consolidate royal power and expand the authority of the state. About the Church, resisted Boniface's demands. This led to a deadlock that fulfills. It culminated in the call of the Council of Rome in 1302, where the Pope issued the Unam Sanctam Bull, claiming papal supremacy over both spiritual and temporal matters. It stated, claiming that all humanity was subject to the Pope. The confrontation peaked with the Pope's arrest in Hainan in 1303 by emissaries of the king. Although beautiful and easy, although later released by a popular uprising, the experience deeply shook his authority and health. He died shortly after under controlled circumstances. In addition to conflict with Philip IV, the papacy of Boniface VIII was also marked by internal controversies, including accusations of nepotism and simony, as well as disputes with other European leaders and even members of the clergy. Some sources still claim that this pope would have stated that there was never a Jesus and the communion wafer is just water and flour, tainting the highest principles of the Catholic Church, the existence of Jesus Christ, Redeemer of humanity, and the Holy Eucharist, transubstantiation in the body of Christ which is present among us. All this makes us realize how the human thirst for power can distort our very principles, tainting even what should be the ultimate connection between God and man. We talk about the controversies that occurred many centuries more, and the latest ones. Well, after various scandals and the divisions caused by the Protestant Reform, the papacy becoming increasingly administrative, who still possesses his powers, of course, but with much more sober behaviors than the ones we just saw. This contributed to the popes becoming cold figures, distant, someone who had to be obeyed, but about whom practically nothing was known. This stance only changed with John Paul II, regarded as the Pope, who took office in 1978 and held it until his death in 2005. He played a key role in spreading the Christian faith, as knew how to take advantage of the emergence and improvement of communication means and the growing globalization to spread his image and the crystal principles. He traveled to numerous countries. He was crucial in several political decisions, which culminated in peace treaties and worked towards the unification of the Church and the resolution of internal conflicts, which had already lasted for many centuries. He had the third longest papacy in history and was canonized in record time. Just 26 days after his death, his canonization process began, which usually can only occur after 5 years from the candidate's death. John Paul II was beatified in 2011 and canonized in 2014. In general, he did not get involved in many controversies. Maybe the biggest was exchanging letters with a Polish-American philosopher named Anna Teresa Cheminieka. More than 350 pistols were found, and many tried to point out that the pontiff had some sort of conjugal relationship with the woman, but none of this was proven. John Paul II was very diplomatic and known for corresponding with non-religious people. Anna Teresa's case seems to have been just another instance, and nothing can be found to prove otherwise. As for his successor, Benedict, God bless you, left some more doubts about his moral integrity. He was likely elected due to his conservative inclinations and being considered an expert scholar and a very smart theologian. However, Benton seemed to lack political skills, which, as we've seen, is something that has been required of popes over the years. After numerous corruption scandals, sexual assaults, and alleged investments in companies that produce contraceptive methods or are used for money laundering, the Pope gradually lost his strength until he resigned due to health issues in 2013. His successor and current Pope, Francis, took office with a challenging mission to unify Christians and overcome imposed challenges. For modernity and freedom, complex history involving the position of pontiff and the Catholic Church. And from the beginning, he has shown commitment to this mission. His controversies are usually related to his progressive views and the refusal to take advantage of the privileges of his position, from his preference for simpler shoes to moving his residence to a convent. The Argentinian Jorge Mario Bergoglio has honored the precepts of his new name, chosen in homage to Saint Francis, known for being one of the most humble saints in Catholicism. The truth is, regardless of your belief, we all know that religions are created and led by human beings, and that makes them prone to making mistakes. It is up to us to learn from past mistakes, to not repeat them in the future, and prevent these deviations. Do not stray us from the initial purpose, walking towards God. That's it for me. See you in the next video. Big hugs. Bye.